The biggest bottleneck for every single business owner that runs a one-on-one based coaching model is the fulfillment. Now, a lot of business owners say that their main problem is getting leads, but once they get more leads sign up and they leave even quicker than it took them to sign up in the first place. That's generally down to the way that you deliver your program. And a lot of the time when we're scaling and then we're getting other team members involved, it's very, very difficult to keep the same level of service that you would be able to provide compared to when you have different team members providing the service as well. That leads us on to one of the main points that pretty much every business owner will face, and that's how to deal with demand and a scalable one-on-one offer at the same time. When we get more demand, generally the service level drops. When we have less demand, the service level can be higher. So how can we build a system that allows us to give the same level of service compared to if we had one client or we had 10,000 clients? And that's where automations come into play, because when we rely on humans, things don't happen the same every single time. Things aren't consistent. There's human error. Humans take time off. Humans get sick. Whereas with automations, we set it up once. It happens every single time, 24/7, 365. We don't even need to think about it. And we essentially have a free staff member working for us all the time. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to automate your check-in process so you can pull out all of the admin, remove it from your task list, and you can literally just focus on what you're being paid to do, and that's helping clients achieve results. Now, there's a few ways that we can build an automated check-in process. Either we can use what I call the sticky tape method, or we can use the streamlined approach and use a CRM software. We have our own CRM software, Systemize to Scale, that replaces pretty much every software in your business for a fraction of the cost, all in one place, or you can use the sticky tape method. Now, before I built Systemize to Scale and we sold the software that we have today, I used to run a business called Automations for Coaches where we used to build the sticky tape method for different businesses. What I mean by the sticky tape method is in businesses, you've got lots of different softwares. All these different softwares doing certain things. You might have Calendly for calls, you might have Typeform for forms, you might have ActiveCampaign for emails, you then might have Trello for task and project management. What the sticky tape method is going into a business and taking all of these different softwares, taking Zapier to connect them all together, so that then essentially you're connecting multiple different softwares together instead of having just one software that does it all. The sticky tape method works up until a point, and that point is when you get your business to a position that it needs a dedicated software to run it all. For example, the more leads that you have, the more steps that an automation has to follow in the sticky tape method, such as sending a lead from Calendly into ActiveCampaign, then into Trello. All these different steps add more room for error, and when there's more room for error and we pump more leads into it, we have far more chance of things going wrong. And when there's more chance of things going wrong, operationally, it's harder to manage, it's more difficult to scale, and when things are more difficult to scale, they generally scale slower. We want a simple business model. We can scale quickly, and we don't want the business model to stop us scaling when we've built a lead flow system that is predictable. I'll show you two ways of doing things: the systemized way inside a CRM software like Systemize to Scale, and then the sticky tape method in something like Zapier and a bunch of different other softwares as well. Now, the first way of essentially doing this inside a CRM software would be building out a pipeline. To be fair, it's the same process with the CRM software as it is with something like Trello. What we want to do is we want to build out a pipeline. So you can build out a pipeline inside your CRM software, which has the following stages. If you were going to use the sticky tape method, you would build out a pipeline with the same stages inside a software like Trello, and you can use Trello for free to start with. You would then here where it says add check-in day, have all of the different days of the weeks that you're doing check-ins. For example, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, if you do check-ins on those days. Just before that, you'll see that we have a column called needing setup, which we just automate it. So every single new sign up drops into this column so we can then see who needs setting up. Once they've been set up, they are then just dragged into the appropriate day of those check-ins. What then happens is when a client's in, say, the Monday column, what that then does is it aligns the reminders for a Monday check-in. When we as a business owner are running things at scale, one of the biggest things that will impact our speed to fulfill is chasing clients for check-ins. And then the second thing that will impact the retention that we have with clients is how many are and aren't checking in. More clients that check in, the more that they check in terms of frequency, the more likely they are to stay. We all know that the clients that then stop giving us feedback, stop communicating, stop checking in are the ones that will churn. So if we can have a system that causes them to check in more, they will stay more, and as a result our lifetime value will be higher and we'll make more money from each client, and then we'll have to spend less on marketing. So we have the appropriate days of the week. Let's say, for example, we're looking at Monday check-ins. What we then do is when a client comes on board, we assign them into a certain day just by dragging them into the day. When they're dragged into that day, what we then do is we have a reminder set up to go out the day before. That reminder will then send out via email and via SMS and or WhatsApp. That then reminds the client to check in. In that reminder, there's a form. They submit their check-in details on that form, and when they check in, that will color code them into green, amber, and red automatically. So then the goal is, from a coaching perspective, you come into here, you check in with the clients that have submitted their feedback on red, and you can just literally click the notes and view all of their check-in answers week by week, so it builds up. So it's easy to then backdate and compare. And then you move on to the clients that are amber, then you move on to the clients that are green. What then happens throughout that process is if a client has been sent all the reminders and they still haven't checked in by the check-in day, so for example on Monday, they then automatically move into your incomplete column. In that incomplete column, what then happens is it triggers another follow-up, email, SMS, and or WhatsApp. When that client then checks in, they then get color-coded again into green, amber, and red. So the whole goal of this is that you open this, you know that every client's been reminded, they've got 24 hours to check in. If they still haven't checked in within 24 hours, they move to incomplete and get reminded again. And then they have another period of time to then submit that check-in form. And then they get categorized into green, amber, and red based off their check-ins. So essentially it takes you out of doing all of the admin, and you just have a system that you come into, you can see where clients are, you can look at their answers, you can compare it week to week. And if you're then running things at scale and you're bringing on board other coaches, it's very easy to monitor their performance, because you can then look at this and you can see how many clients are red, how many are amber, how many are green, how many aren't checking in, and then you can essentially fix those bottlenecks. It allows you to fix problems before they become problems, because you're then understanding which clients are struggling the most, and you can then give them more hand-holding. Now we have a couple of different automations that run this. If we go into what we call the STS check-in system, we essentially have three main automations. The first automation is the actual reminder. So we have it set up so when a client is moved into a certain column, it tags them, it updates their source just on that check-in board, so we can then see which day of the week they're in. And then it will essentially schedule them in for those certain reminders. So for example, this is scheduling in for a Thursday check-in reminder, but the whole goal would then be to schedule them in for the appropriate day. You'll then see here that it will then schedule them in for the certain day. So in this example, it's waiting till Thursday at 6 a.m, ready to then get their check-in on Friday. But if you're doing a different day, you'll then just essentially select a different day and then select the time. That then waits until that time, sends them an email, then adds a tag to then trigger the check-in follow up if they've not checked in, waits 8 hours, then sends another nudge over SMS or WhatsApp, and then it just loops every single week. What it then does though is when it adds that tag as an incomplete check-in reminder, what it will then do is it will trigger this second automation. This second automation here essentially will then trigger, and it will come down, and then it will go, right, let's then wait 1 day. So after they've been tagged, so we've got two ways that this triggers. One, if the coach manually moves into the incomplete column. If they do that, it will instantly send an email, an SMS, or WhatsApp follow-up. If the automation triggers it by tagging them, it will come in, it will wait a day, so 24 hours, giving them a chance to check in. If they haven't checked in within 24 hours, it will then follow up with them and send them an email and SMS or WhatsApp too, and then remove the tags, so that next week it can trigger again. However, you're probably going to say, well, what if they check in between that? Surely you don't want the reminder sending out. You are absolutely right. If we click into the other automation, what we then have set up is when they submit the appropriate form, the check-in form, it saves their answers as a note, it will notify the coach with an email, and then what it will do is it will color code them on the board into green, amber, and red based off the answers that they've checked in. We then basically have a check-in question on the form which asks them to overall to rank their week, and then based off their answers, that uses logic to then categorize them and update them on the appropriate board, so then the coach can see which color-coded column that client's in. That then allows us with three very simple automations to literally automate a whole check-in process, and essentially then just take a business owner out of being stuck in the check-in process to now having a system that then allows them to bring on board coaches and run things at scale. Now, the way that we do this in the platform as well, inside the platform, we then build a check-in form, essentially a survey, and in here we then have a series of questions. We then always embed this on a funnel. So the whole goal of this is that you can see the questions here, then this is embedded on an actual funnel, so then it looks visually appealing, and then we just link that funnel link inside the reminders. And we can obviously add more slides. So the goal is that when a client comes on board, we then build out a check-in form based off the specific questions that they need. So then the goal is that they get the appropriate feedback needed from a client every single week, and then that board just updates. Now you're probably then saying, well, this is great, but how do I do this inside Zapier using the sticky tape method? And I'm going to show you it now. And the cool thing with this is all workflows pretty much follow the same process. We have a trigger at the top when this thing happens, then we have a series of automation actions that happen afterwards. So when someone fills that form, then move them on this board, then send this email, then tag them. So the whole goal is that all workflow builders follow the same fashion. We just do the same thing, but inside Zapier this time. So inside Zapier, we would follow the same approach. So what we would do is we would have it set up so when someone is moved into the appropriate column on Trello, so we'd then choose when someone's moved into the appropriate list, we'd connect our Trello account, and then we can select which list. That will then mean that every time we move someone into, say, the Monday column, this automation triggers. We then add an action to add them into ActiveCampaign. And what we can then do is we can create or update a contact, connect our ActiveCampaign account, and then we'll be able to add in the custom fields from the first step. By that, I mean the following. I'll connect my ActiveCampaign account and I'll show you an example. So in this step, what we can do is if we were to click this plus icon and we had connected our Trello account, it will then pull through a few examples. It will pull through their emails, their names, all of that key data that we can then use to fill in these columns. And you would just literally select email from here in the email column. You'll then click plus, select name. What that will then do is it will then use that as a custom field, and that will update every single time a lead goes through this to then mean that we're always then pushing the freshest lead through into the appropriate list. We can then tag them down here with a tag. For example, we could go Monday check-in reminder. And then in ActiveCampaign, we would just create a workflow that triggers when the tag Monday check-in reminder is added. We would then just do that reminder sequence like we did inside the CRM a minute ago, where in the CRM we had the looping automation. So inside here we had the check-in reminder. We would essentially do the same thing where we have it set up so when someone goes in ActiveCampaign, it would wait until a certain day, send an email, 8 hours, an SMS or WhatsApp, 3 days, and then it loops back around. It's important that you add the 3-day step at the bottom, otherwise it will loop around straight away and you then just run the risk of it potentially just re-triggering. So just adding in that 3 days, generally it would be fine because you've got 8 hours waiting up here, but if you didn't have wait 8 hours and you didn't have 3 days and you just had it looping around, it would then re-trigger every second for that time frame that you set here. So essentially for basically 59 seconds, it would then trigger. So it would send 59 messages, which is obviously defeats the point. Cool. That's then automation 1 inside Zapier. We'd save it, we'd publish it. The next automation we would do is if we backtrack, we would then create another automation, and then we would have the trigger as Typeform or whatever our form software is. We would then choose when that form is submitted to then trigger the automation. What we would then want to do is we would want to change the way that we set this out. So we'd then choose path. So this is another automation. Imagine we saved the one we just did. We're now creating a new one. We would then create some paths. We'd call this green. We'd call this amber. And we'd call this red. What we would then do is with these triggers, we'd then say if the condition contains this, if the condition contains this, and if the condition contains this. So what we would then want to do is in this top step, we'd click here and we'd select one of the answers that came through Typeform. For example, if you remember inside our automation here, we had it set up so when the condition contains the certain question of overall, how would you rate your week? So here we've got a question, overall, how would you rate your week? How would you describe your week, sorry? We would then choose the same thing. So we'd find that question in the Typeform, select the custom field of overall, how would you describe the week? And then we'd put in the answer. So the green one, they might answer green. The amber one, they might answer amber. And then the red one, they might answer red. We press continue and test it. And then all we would then do down here is we would then add a step called Trello. And what we'd then do is we would then choose a step called find a card on a board. So find card here. And then you'd be able to connect your Trello account and you would then find it based off the email. So the really cool thing with automations is we only need one similarity to be able to match things up: email or phone number or name. Generally, I would always lean on email or phone number before name. The thing with a name is some people abbreviate it. They might go Joe and Joseph, which then means the automation won't match them up. Whereas things like emails and phone numbers, they're generally constant, so they're generally always the same. So you'll generally get more consistency if you're trying to match things up based off that. So we can then find a card based off the email. And then down here, we can go Trello again. And what we can then do is we can essentially move the card to a list. And we can then essentially select the ID of this one. So like how in here, we clicked here and we selected the data from Typeform. Once we've connected our Trello account, it will give us the option to click the plus icon and we can then select the ID from this step where we found it. Every single Trello card has a unique ID. When you're in Trello and you click on a card, you will notice that there's essentially like a list of numbers like this, numbers and letters. That's the unique ID. It will move them on the list, and then inside Trello, what we can do again is we can then essentially leave a comment as well. So we can then create a comment, select the ID of the card again, and then you can add a comment of all of the answers from Typeform, which again, when we're creating this, we'll have the option to click the plus and then select their submission from the form. That then means that they'll get updated, they'll get moved, and then they'll have a comment with all of their answers, then all of their data is all in one place for you. That is the second automation that will then essentially move people around your pipeline to essentially categorize them and save their data into Trello instead of you having to jump between these different softwares. Now, the third automation using the sticky tape method would be combining an automation inside ActiveCampaign and an automation inside Zapier. Now, inside ActiveCampaign, what we would do would be a very similar approach to what we did inside the automation inside Systemize to Scale a minute ago. So inside this workflow, you'll notice that down here we add the tag incomplete. We'd want to do the same thing. So when we built this reminder inside ActiveCampaign, we'd have the same process of waiting till a certain day and time, sending an email, and then tagging them. Inside the Systemize Scale CRM, what we then do is you'll see that when we add that tag then triggers the incomplete follow-up. So here we then have, when that tag is added, it triggers this follow-up sequence. It then waits a day before sending the email and SMS. That's the same thing that we want to do inside ActiveCampaign, and then we'll create the next automation that will remove them from that within Zapier when they then submit the form. So back into Zapier and inside the automation that we created earlier that categorizes them, we would add a step at the top because we want this action to happen regardless if they're green, amber, or red. We would add a step and we'd call it ActiveCampaign. In this step, what we would then do is we would choose remove from contact from automation, and we would then essentially allow ourselves to remove that contact from the certain automation. We can connect our account and then we can essentially add a step to then remove them from the specific automation that we created earlier inside ActiveCampaign, which is the follow-up if they haven't essentially completed their check-in. Just one point with this though is in order to make that step easier, I would suggest adding a step before that called find contact. This will then allow you to search for a contact in ActiveCampaign based off an email address. And then in this second step, it will ask you what contact you want to remove from the automation. You can click the plus icon and then select the ID of number 2, and then it will pull that out of the automation. You've then created a fully automated check-in process using the sticky tape method with a few simple automations that will run 24/7 for you without you lifting your finger. And just like that, with a few simple automations, you've essentially streamlined one of the most difficult parts of a one-to-one coaching model, the check-in process. You can now focus on fulfilling the workload and delivering results to clients rather than being stuck with admin. I see a lot of business owners, they limit the number of clients that they can work with because their check-in process is so slow. Instead, a process like this will speed it up, and it will mean that your profit margin is far higher because you can onboard more clients, you don't have to pay staff, and you can just keep fulfilling more workload without having to actually do many more hours compared to if you're running this manually or with a process like this.